This is the story of Aloha Airlines Flight 243 on June 1988. An Aloha Airlines Boeing 737 was flying from Honolulu to the island of Maui in Hawaii. The pilots were following their flight plan and everything seemed normal for the most part, but at 2,800 feet, the pilots noticed that their altitude was starting to decrease, so the pilots decided to make a mayday call. As they made their way to the radio, they realized that their plane had just gone through some serious turbulence because their seatbelts had come undone. As the plane continued to drop, the pilots were able to contact ATC, and once ATC realized what was going on, they immediately offered the pilots of Flight 243 help. The pilots of Flight 243 needed to land as soon as possible. They were put on priority and told to divert to the Kahului Airport, which was only 26 nautical miles away. The pilots knew that this landing would be unlike any other because their left engine was not working properly. One of their engines was dead. Things got a whole lot worse for the passengers on board Flight 243 as the plane began its descent into Maui. One of the flight attendants found something unbelievable. In fact, she would later say that she couldn't believe her eyes, that the plane was depressurizing. At the same time, she saw that one of the windows on the plane had blown out. She immediately went to check on the passengers, but by the time she got there, the cabin was already in chaos. Some people were screaming while others were looking out of the broken window in disbelief. When the flight attendant finally reached the window, she looked out of it and saw that the side of their plane was completely ripped open. It was like someone had literally bitten into the side of their plane. But that was not the worst part. The worst part was that there was a hole big enough for a person to fit through. Thankfully, no one had been sucked out of the plane. But the passengers who were sitting closest to the window had barely managed to keep themselves inside the plane. With a gaping hole in the side of their plane, the pilots of Flight 243 lined up with the runway. The pilots were now dealing with more than just a loss of cabin pressure and an engine. They also had to deal with the gaping hole in the side of their plane. Despite all of these problems, the pilots of Flight 243 managed to land safely. Once the plane had landed, emergency services rushed to the scene. Thankfully, none of the 89 people on board had been injured. Now, while the landing had been bumpy, the pilots had done an amazing job considering the situation they were in. The passengers, on the other hand, were traumatized. Many of them had never experienced anything like this before in their lives. As the investigation into this incident got underway, the world wanted answers. How on earth did the side of this plane fall off? Is this a case of sabotage? These questions would plague the minds of the investigators for a long time. But before we get into how this happened, if you enjoyed watching this video so far, then make sure to hit the like button. This will help us a lot. Now back to the video. Before we get into the cause of this accident, let's take a look at the history of this plane. This Boeing 737-200 had first flown in February 1980. So in 1988, it was 8 years old. But even though this plane was getting up there in age, it had been well maintained. In fact, it had been maintained to such a high standard that the FAA even awarded Aloha Airlines for being the best small airline in terms of maintenance. So if the plane was well maintained and it wasn't brand new, why did the side of it fall off? Well, when the NTSB started inspecting the plane, they found out that the reason behind the decompression was pretty obvious. The plane had suffered from metal fatigue. But what caused this metal fatigue? Well, the answer to this question lay on the outside of the plane. You see, planes are built to withstand a lot of stress. After all, they're flying machines. But there's one part of a plane that has to withstand more stress than any other part, and that is the fuselage. Every time the plane takes off, the fuselage is under extreme stress. The plane goes from being stationary to moving at hundreds of miles per hour in just seconds. This puts a lot of stress on the body of the plane. Over time, this stress causes the metal to become very brittle, and if the plane isn't maintained properly, cracks can begin to form on the body of the plane. In the case of this plane, the cracks had formed on the upper part of the fuselage. This part of the plane experiences more stress than any other part of the plane. Aloha Airlines did everything right. It caught the cracks early and sent the plane in for maintenance. But the sad truth is that Aloha Airlines didn't have enough money to fix the plane properly. You see, airlines have to decide for themselves whether or not they're going to cut corners. And in this case, Aloha Airlines decided to do just that. After the cracks were discovered, It was estimated that it would cost over $2 million to fix the plane properly. But instead of doing that, Aloha Airlines decided to spend just $250,000 on a quick fix. This quick fix would have worked, but there was just one problem. The mechanic who was hired to do the job didn't do it properly. Instead of focusing on the area where the cracks were, he focused on another part of the plane. He basically missed the spot where the cracks were entirely. This led to the cracks continuing to grow without anyone noticing. These cracks would eventually cause the side of the plane to fall off. But how exactly did the side of the plane fall off? The investigators examined the plane, and they found that the side of the plane fell off due to a combination of factors. One of the main reasons why the side of the plane fell off was the fact that the plane had exceeded its maximum operating altitude. When the side of the plane fell off, the plane was at 2,800 feet. But its max operating altitude was 2,500 feet, because the plane was at an altitude higher than it was rated for. This caused the air pressure to be lower than what the plane was designed to operate in. Because of this, the plane's fuselage wasn't getting the support it was supposed to. But that wasn't the only reason why the side of the plane fell off. The side of the plane had suffered from metal fatigue, but this metal fatigue had been ignored. If the metal fatigue hadn't been ignored, and the plane had been fixed properly, then maybe this accident could have been avoided. But even though this accident could have been avoided, it still happened. And this plane ended up losing the side of its fuselage in midair. While investigating this incident, the NTSB noticed something else as well. The bolt holes on the plane had corroded, which meant that these bolts weren't tight, and this led to the plane's structure weakening. All of these factors combined led to the side of the plane falling off. After this incident, the FAA stepped in and grounded 13 planes, all of which had the same problem. Even though no one was hurt in this incident, the near miss could have been a lot worse. In fact, the pilots of Flight 243 were hailed as heroes. Had they not reacted quickly, then the consequences of this accident could have been a lot worse. In the days following this accident, many people were afraid to fly. This was understandable given the fact that a piece of a plane had fallen off in midair. But even though people were afraid to fly, statistics showed that flying was still one of the safest ways to travel. In the aftermath of this incident, Aloha Airlines was sued by some of its passengers. To this day, it's unknown how much the airline had to pay out in lawsuits. But what we do know is that Aloha Airlines no longer exists. The airline ceased operations in 2008. This incident remains one of the most incredible incidents in aviation history. And to think that a near miss like this happened on a routine domestic flight is crazy. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please leave a like. If you want to see more videos like this, then stay tuned. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this video. Have a great day and goodbye.